الله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Inshallah, with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one, and with the blessings of the Messenger and Ahlul Bayt sallallahu alayhi ajma'in, we begin this course or series, 6-week course on Tawhid, and we will be reflecting on Tawhid through the writings of Shaykh Mutahhari, specifically the article or the part of the book that we shared in the group. I believe that everyone has access to it, inshallah. This is a compilation through some of his lectures, in fact, on Tawhid, and as usual, very brilliant in his in the way he explains and analyzes anything that he does, including obviously the concept of Tawhid. When we speak of Tawhid, this session, just so that we have an overview what we are going to cover this session, when we speak of Tawhid, the one very important thing that we want to address this session is Tawhid as a worldview, not just a concept in theology. Okay, so we have in theology, if somebody, when we say Tawhid, often what comes to the mind is we are speaking now about it, or theology, and therefore now we're speaking about one of the usul. Okay, and this just reminds me of the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who say that God is one of the three have denied. لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ ثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ. And sometimes it seems like we make him one of five, in the sense that when it comes to usul, we have usul al-din 5, where now this is again, when we speak theology, and our understanding of faith, the principles, we might look at the different areas of faith. Okay, so the principles based on the areas that we are addressing. So obviously we have Tawhid and Nubuwwah and so on. However, Tawhid should not be limited to that, and that's not what we're discussing here. We're speaking of our way of perceiving and seeing or understanding life, the universe around us, understanding the world, understanding ourselves. And here we're speaking of Tawhid as the one principle. In fact, even when it comes to theology, if we were to be fair, Tawhid is the only principle. Everything else revolves around Tawhid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. All of his attributes, we say again, okay, what's the second, typically the second one that people would know is Adl, yes? Why Adl, why not Rahmah, for example? Why not any other attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Ilm, for example. The imams of other schools, not the imams of Ahlul Bayt, imams in other schools of thought. Malik, he was asked about God, he said, Allah God is in the heavens and his knowledge is everywhere. Okay, which is a big problem because he already made two gods, one in the heavens and one is everywhere. And that's obviously not how it is. But why not al-ilm, for instance, when we speak of usul al-din? And so, obviously, again, in a discussion of theology, we'll explain that it's because we are focusing on what is misunderstood. Adl is misunderstood, so we are emphasizing on Adl being one of the principles, one of the usul, and one of the core, in fact, usul. However, Adl is part of Tawhid. We cannot, man wasafahu faqad adda. Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha, he says, if you describe God, you are counting him. And when you count him, you're limiting him. And we are putting an opponent for him. And or jazza, now you're making him into parts, like that guy did. He's one and his knowledge is another. Okay, which is not cannot be accepted by one who believes who's a real monotheist. So Adl is part and parcel of the Tawhid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the oneness, the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about Nubuwwah? Nubuwwah is through his guidance. He is the guide, he guides. So he sends, so it's creation of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Imam, same thing, extension of Nubuwwah. Ma'ad is to establish the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and express or display his abundant mercy. This is وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُمْ, for Rahmah he created. So he wants to show that Rahmah, and therefore there's Ma'ad. So again, all of it goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we speak about Tawheed in our discussion here, we're speaking of a worldview, not of the theological Tawheed that we discussed in the discussions of Aqa'id, where we are speaking of perhaps the different things that we should believe in as Muslims or as specifically as followers of Ahlul Bayt. In that discussion, we have the Adl and the Imam are parts of the Usul. Here we're speaking of our worldview, seeing the world through the lens of a monotheist, a muwahhid, Tawhid. This is one of the important points that we wanted to discuss. And I will speak very briefly, but I would like to hear from everybody. And they can speak through the Zoom?
Yes.
Yes. So please feel free to interrupt. And I wouldn't even call it intercept maybe is a better term. But feel free to share your comments, your questions. And the idea is we've done our reading, and here we're discussing it together, inshallah. But I'll try and lead the discussion to the best of my ability, inshallah. So that's one very important point that we want to discuss, the Tawheed being a worldview, not just one of the usul al-din, or one of the principles of the religion. The second issue that we want to perhaps address this evening is to define Tawheed in the context of a worldview. So now we're looking at Tawheed as our way of seeing the world, and now we'll define it. What does it mean? Just to go back to a little bit through the introduction as displayed by in the book or in the part of the book that we shared. If you had a chance, and again, the goal is not to read here. The idea is, inshallah, you've had a chance to do some reading, and then we will discuss it. So if you had a chance to do some reading, one of the discussions that was there early on was to define a human being. One of the important things, and this goes back to Ma'rifah, to understand, to have knowledge and understanding of the realities. Here, to understand yourself. The hadith, we have a beautiful hadith says, Man arafa nafsa, faqad arafa rabbah. Whoever knows himself, therefore they have recognized and they have knowledge of God. If you know yourself, you know that you're only a creation of God. That if I think, not I think, therefore I exist, I think, therefore I'm created. Okay? I have a creator who has put this thinking in. Okay? So knowing oneself and understanding ourselves beyond the physical body that we are, trapped in a way. Our ulama, they refer to the body as a prison because it has its needs, it has its limitations. Whereas ruh is way more free and way more powerful. This is why often I say Shahada, martyrs, they are living beyond this physical world. And so they're a lot more powerful. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, through his martyrdom, became the most influential after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In terms of the personalities in the history of humanity, after Rasulullah, you have, and perhaps Amir al-Mu'mineen being next to Rasulullah. After them, you have Imam Hussein alayhi salam being the most influential in the world, and you will see it growing year after year. Okay, so why? Because this is now the realm of ruh, not the body. Yes, his body was trampled upon in Karbala, but his ruh lives on, and he's a martyr, therefore he has a lot more power. So the ruh is a lot more powerful. Unfortunately, many scientists and scholars that study the world and try and understand the world misunderstood the presence or the reality of insan. And some downgrade him to animal. So one of the discussions there is the whether insan is simply the animal form with a little bit more in IQ. So sometimes that's what it's looked at. Okay, we have more mental ability than animals. Okay, but that's what we are. Okay, just the animal form and a little more, abilities, skills when it comes to mental skills, not physical. Because physical, we cannot beat the animal world. You cannot be as fast as some of the animals. You cannot be as loud as some of the animals. You cannot be as powerful as some of the animals. So when it comes to the physical abilities, we're not anything special in the world of animals or mammals. But what makes us special are the mental abilities, the vocal abilities, and so on. Quran refers to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ar-Rahman khalaqa al-insan, allamahu bayan. He taught insan the ability to speak. So one of the most important attributes of insan is the ability to express, communicate at the level that we do, the level of languages. And beyond that, the ability to document our thoughts, to write it. الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. Amazing. God taught the bayan, the speech, but also taught the insan the ability to document, بالقلم. Yeah? And that takes us to a whole different level. In fact, humanity would never have reached where we are today in terms of advancement if we did not document our knowledge, our understanding. This is why it's important that everyone contributes to it. Today we have AI going through what? Going through its own creation? No, what man created throughout centuries, in terms of knowledge and information and so on. And so this tool is very helpful, to be honest, to put it together, to draw from wherever it needs to draw information to put together answers for us. A brilliant calculator, if you wish, a brilliant machine to bring. But who has put it together other than insan? Not just one, collectively. And this is an amazing ability that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put into us, the ability to communicate and document our communication so that it goes on from one generation to another. And this is, in fact, if you read, he calls it the touchstone of man's distinctiveness. So how distinctive man is, we owe it to the ability to pass on what we have reached in terms of knowledge and understanding to the next generation. Some of you are with us in the Quran translation or the tafsir and the discussion in that specifically in the translation project. And one of the things that I often remind myself and Minat is how important it is that we document our understanding. The previous nation, previous generation, they went ahead and did their part. Whether it be translations, tafsir, whatever it is, they did their part. Now we need to do our part and pass it on to the next generation. And it has to be, and not just a copy of theirs, it has to be another level of progression towards Kamal, towards perfection. And step by step, collectively, we work on that as the human society. So there's a discussion on the relationship between the insan on the two dimensions. The dimension of the physical insan, and we said some downgraded insan to the physical body, and the other dimension is the insan beyond the physical existence. For instance, his emotions, okay, love, certain faith. Okay, faith is not a physical thing within us. And subhanAllah, when it comes to the dimension which some unfortunately deny or try to explain within the physical existence, they try to downgrade it and explain it within the physical existence, whether it be love or any other concept. And therefore, when it comes to concepts like God and the spiritual realm, angels, and so on, they consider it again when it comes to certain scientists or thinkers who try to deny our spiritual existence. They try to explain all of this in the realm of the physical body. And some of it they consider a product of hallucinations and so on and so forth. Or imaginations. Whereas a complete worldview here of the monotheist will see insan not just as the physical body and not just as the spiritual body. In fact, they see the combination as an extension of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the two together. And that should be our worldview, our understanding. Not that we limit it to either of those. We cannot deny, some Muslims come to a level of denial of the body. Almost like this is not reality. Everything in this universe is imagination or basically just wahm is the term I'm trying to find this translation. Khiyal is the imagination, and wahm is perhaps when you have perceptions in your mind, things that are in your mind. It's not reality out there. It's more of virtual, if you want. Something that's virtual, something that's not real. In any case, some go as far as that, others go as far as we're human, we're physical only. And the correct approach, obviously, is to look at ourselves as the combination of the two. This is where the discussion of materialism, or Murtadha, he calls it, which is to completely look at this world from a materialist perspective. Everything is the product of man, Mother Nature. Another method of looking at the world is where they look at it as he calls it the dualism or the Mutahhari, meaning basically looking at two distinct forces operating in this universe. Meaning you have for some, for instance, it's the good versus evil. They look at them as two distinct forces that control the universe, and they're almost like fighting with one another. You have, especially in the Zoroastrians, they have this. They have the two forces, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, fighting against each other. Who is going to be more powerful? You know, the evil and versus good. Okay, so God being the in charge of the good, and the devil or whatever you want to call it, in charge of the evil. So that's one worldview. Whereas the worldview, and there are reasons why they come to these conclusions. I'll give you an example. If we look at events that are extremely disastrous, whether it's man-made or nature. Okay? Say, for instance, an earthquake, and millions died. Some could not explain that, given what we understand about, or what we are told about God. But we know God is merciful, correct? God is the source of good. God is the source of sustenance, beautification. Yeah. And all of a sudden we see something that's evil. Back then, or even perhaps today, some may think that that can only happen if God is not in charge of this. Because if he is, then he wouldn't allow it. This is something bad. Yeah? Evil. That's what the assumption is. If God is in charge, why would he allow an earthquake to kill millions or thousands of people and many innocent children in them? You see where the problem is? If God is in charge, for them, the question, for us, since God is in charge, and we have an explanation. But for them, they came to this conclusion that there must be another force, and they are fighting, and perhaps believer, being a monotheist, for example, they would assume that the forces of goodness will eventually win against the forces of evil. So God will win eventually. But in the meantime, it's allowed that sometimes things are, well, I obviously refuse to God from such a thought, that things are out of control for God. Now think about it. If we were to look at the world around us, and things are happening, evil things are happening, what would you, or how would you see the hands of God in that? Until not long ago, I mean, I think it's still going in a way, it is still, but one group of people decide to attack another group of people, and bombing people and killing people, left, right, and center. Okay. And some, I back then, I started receiving questions, and valid questions, where is God? I'm not saying valid in the sense that we're denying God alive or not. No, valid in the sense that we want to understand. It's hard to understand. How could all this happen? For some people, it's like, where? How? Why? There are a lot of questions. And for some, they came to this conclusion that there are two forces. Some may be amongst Muslims today. Okay? who believe that these forces are fighting. And the evil is so powerful that it's almost like God doesn't have the, or Ayatollah, again, seeking refuge to God from this thought, that it's almost like God doesn't have the power to stop it. You see where the worldview of Tawhid is important? Looking at things with through the lens of a monotheist, knowing that as some they come to the statement لا محرك في الوجود إلا الله, which is almost a literal translation of لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Nothing moves this world except God. Or what we say in the ayah, لا حول statement again, لا حول ولا قوة, this dhikr, powerful dhikr, لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. There's absolutely no power and no means for anything to happen except with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is where now we have to look at what is happening given the fact that it's all in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the permission granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a reason. Now again, coming to disasters, I brought that up, earthquakes and so on. If we look at this world as the end, we will never be able to explain it. If this world was the goal and the end, we wouldn't be able to explain it. But if we understand that this is a short, it's a temporary abode, and we're passing through it to another world, and therefore, ultimately, the reward and the consequences are the significant rewards and consequences are for the hereafter, eternity versus the short life that we're living here, the limited time that we have in this world. So then we will understand that, okay, those who God decreed that they would depart this world, it's for a better good for them. There's not an issue. When He allows one to harm the other, He allows the free will to take its place for one to be rewarded for their patience and perseverance and faith, and for the other to prove to themselves where they belong when they end up in the torment of hell and so on. That is a proof against that. So again, from a monotheistic perspective, seeing the world around us, things would be very different to if we were to only look at the world as a dualist who's looking at the two forces, or materialist who's only looking at cost and benefit analysis. I once, I don't know if we've had this conversation before, but I had to do a debate at university on this subject, cost and benefit analysis. And interestingly, if you do some research about it, you'll find that they have to put numbers for everything. So human life will have to have a value. And interestingly, when they do that, they have to put a value based on what it would cost as well. So a human life in some parts of the world is different to another part of the world. So for instance, in the United States, the cost of a human being could be a compensation that they would have to pay, I don't know, $1 million, less, more, whatever it is. Whereas in another part of the world, it could be $10,000 or even less, maybe, I don't know. And so they have to put numbers for even like the carbon, what do you call it, footprint? Is that what the polluting nature? Okay, destroying nature, destroying so much of the ozone layer, destroying the oceans, and we put a number for it. How can you do that? How can you put a cost to that? And therefore, then they have to do that to analyze it against the benefits. Okay, so then they would suggest, okay, there's still some benefit, therefore it's worthwhile doing. This is a very limited materialist worldview based on completely based on the world of matter. Ethics are out of the equation. Even ethics are consequential. They're not even, there's no standard in ethics to say this is ethical or unethical. It all depends for them. And again, this is a worldview of the materialist versus a worldview of monotheist or Tawhid worldview. I think I said a lot. Now I want to hear from everyone else. And I do have some exercises. You may have read them. If you have, if not, I will read them. And we can do some activity, inshallah.
I posted in the chat the
Yeah.
plan for today.
For today, right. Yes, so there are questions that you need to ask yourselves, and perhaps we, through our discussion, we covered most of it. If I'm missing anything, we can discuss it further. Number one, what is a worldview? And how does it shape our understanding of life? And the second question is Tawhid as more than monotheism. I think we covered that. And it's a complete perspective on existence. And then the last one, a comparison between Tawhid with other worldviews like materialism and dualism. So these are the areas that we covered, the discussions that we can have if anyone wants to perhaps share their perspective. How does a person's worldview affect their moral and practical choices? I think we alluded to that, but if anyone wants to share anything, please feel free. If you want, I'll read the other question as well. So one is, how does it shape or affect our moral and practical choices? And the other one is, what are the key differences between a Tawhidi worldview and a secular one?
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
I guess for the first one, I guess that the Tawhidi worldview recognizes a higher moral authority in the God. So moral actions aren't only based on convenience or even social trends or the environment around you, but rather they're based on divine guidance. Somebody with a materialistic or even a dual worldview will prioritize everything else, self-interest, efficiency, something that will lead to very different choices in life. And that can be easily persuaded and changed based off of their social factors and environment around them as well.
Very correct. So just to reiterate, I guess people online can hear it.
I think so.
Yeah. However, we'll just restate it, provide I understood correctly. But the point is that was being made is that Tawhidi worldview is inspired by God. There's divinity in it. Therefore, the standards, the moral, what is moral or immoral, is taught by God. It's not man-made. It's not personal. It's not it's not based on personal preferences or gains or societal. It is all divinely inspired and taught. Whereas the other types of worldviews, whether materialists or now the materialist obviously is based on gains. Okay, what you may gain or lose in this very, very physically materialist, material-wise, what you gain or lose. That's a materialist worldview. But what about the dualists? Any idea what is the issue with that? If someone was to look at the world as the two forces, opposing forces, fighting the good versus evil, versus a monotheist. Anyone? Any suggestions? So just a quick comment on this. One of the, again, when we're looking at a dualist worldview, they are looking at two distinct powers that are controlling the universe. And therefore, you can align yourself with any of the two. And in some cases, some people, specifically the evil ones, they feel that the evil one is the more powerful one. Even if that's not their theory or their belief, as in which school they belong to, which religion or school they belong to. They might be Christian, they might be Muslim, they might be Jewish, they might be any religion. Okay, but practically their worldview, from a practical point of view, is that there are two forces against each other, good and evil, and somehow they feel in this world the evil is more powerful, and so they think, even if it's temporary, we align ourselves with the evil one. You see where the problem is? I'll give you an example. Again, what we find ourselves always going back to Kabbalah. The two forces in Kabbalah. Okay, you have Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and you have on the other hand Yazid and his Al Abi Sufyan. Al Rasulillah and Al Abi Sufyan. That's why the Imams called them Yashi'at Al Abi Sufyan. You know, for those who accuse the Shia of being the ones who were in Kufa, and therefore they were in charge, they were responsible for what happened in Karbala. The answer is from the word of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He called them Shi'at al Abi Sufyan. They were not his Shia, they were not the Shia of Ali alayhi salam for sure. They were the Shia of al Abi Sufyan. Did they not know that Imam Hussein alayhi salam on the day of Ashura represented the Prophet and therefore represented God? They knew that. They knew that for sure. So why did they fight him? Ibn Sa'd, Umar ibn Sa'd, has a statement. It's actually a poem that he said on leaving, maybe on the night of the 10th, the night of the Ashura. It is suggested that he said it around that time. That he said, أَأَتْرُكُ مُلْكَ الرَّيِّ وَالرَّيُّ مُلْيَتِي. Do I let go of the kingdom or the governorship of Ray? Ray is the area in today's Iran near Tehran. Very, very green, beautiful region. And he was promised, if he fulfills this mission of either taking the vow of Imam Hussein alayhi salam or massacring, literally. If he fulfills it, he will get the governorship of Ray. That was the promise. So he says, do I let go of Ray? Well, Ray Humanity, it's my dream. You know, when you're looking at materialism, and here we have a mix of materialism and also dualism. So then he says, or do I face my Lord on the day of judgment with the blood of Imam Hussein on my hands? These are the two choices I have. And therefore, he says, if this is the dualism, okay, if it is true and I will be returned to my Lord, then I'll seek forgiveness. Yeah? Because now the force of evil is more powerful. Hussein is the right one. Hussein is the one that God is going to reward and punish based on your relationship with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. I know that. And if I have the blood of Imam Hussein on my hands, it's terrible. But But now, for this world, the forces of evil are so powerful, they can give you all the wealth, the governorship, all the things that you like. Therefore, he aligned himself with evil, knowing that it's evil. Do you see it? And many people do that. When they make their choices in life, they align themselves with the more powerful, even if they know that this is not the godly good path, this is the evil path. This is dualism. This is seeing that force as more powerful, because why does it happen? Because their vision is very limited. In that scenario, they're looking at a short-lived life in this dunya as the more significant than long life. Even life of dunya, only my life, only for a short period of time, versus me and the extensions from generations to come. Those who do for God, they sacrifice for God and do good for the sake of God, God grants them and their children and grandchildren and great. It goes generations after them. Whereas the other one, gone. His whole Imam Hussein said, you are trying to cut off my lineage, may God cut off your lineage. There's nothing remaining of him. Gone. Nothing. With him and his evil act and finishes, Mukhtar kills him, kills his son, and there's nothing remaining. Finished. Subhanallah. So this is again the way of seeing, regardless of what religious he was Muslim supposedly, and he prayed. And by the way, some of you may know or may not, on the day of Ashura, he was leading the army of the enemy in prayers. This is an individual who perhaps recited beautifully, and had memorized perhaps so much Quran. It's nothing to do with the labels, with the group of faith that we belong to. On the other hand, we have people who joined Imam Hussein alayhi salam who were not even Muslim at the time, and joined the Imam and became martyred for the sake of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We salute them every time we salute Imam Hussein alayhi salam. We give السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. The Ashab, the companions who were martyred with Imam Hussein, reached the highest levels compared to one who lost. Again, this is the impact of the worldview of a monotheist versus a worldview of a materialist or dualist or any other worldview that one may have. Let's move on to the activity of this. So ideally we should have a group discussion here, if we can, inshallah. So how does Tawhid influence Muslims' view on life, destiny, and purpose?
Is a question. Can I?
There is a question, please.
Yeah. How, in times of fear and oppression, how can we practically strengthen our Tawhid enough that we do see the other side? We don't see the other side as more powerful and cave into their intimidation and know what is the right thing to do.
One of the most important things to remember when it comes to seeing the world around us, the powers, perhaps the superpowers, or whichever dictatorship or system that existed throughout the history. This is nothing new. It has been there from the times of Ahlul Bayt, at the time of the Bani Umayyah, then Ben Abbas. Al-Hajjaj created so much terror and was responsible for the blood of thousands and thousands of good people, godly people, followers of Ahlul Bayt amongst them, many of them. He was a hater, literally a hater. So at these times, one of the most important things to remember, and I said it I think earlier, is that this world is not the end. Unless and until we are strong in our faith in life after death, we will not understand the concept of pain and suffering in this world. It's not possible to understand. Why is there pain? Why is there suffering? Why are the innocent people being killed? Why even nature sometimes? Why is there a drought in some parts of the world? Okay, why is it that in Africa the lack of water sometimes, or lack of good clean water, becomes the cause of death of many people, or even lack of water, rain, vegetation, therefore cause of famine and death of many people. All of these things would never be explained and can never be understood given in light of the justice and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless we remember the hereafter. That's why dhikr is very important whenever there are difficult times. What do we say? Let's go to the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. Surely we will test you. بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ. Perhaps khawf being the first one is because it is a very, very severe situation. Fear. Okay. Having fear and living under fear, living with fear of a government, a system, an individual, okay, someone. It's a terrible state to live in. It's constant. Living in fear is constant. Like pain, you have, let's say you have a toothache, okay? It comes and goes, yes? And it gives you, the body, at some point, the body says, okay, with chronic pains, the body stops having the receptors, or stops sending the messages so that you have a break, okay? Or maybe it fights back or whatever. But imagine a state of constant fear, for instance. بشيء من الخوف والجوع, hunger is very difficult. And then نقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات, lack of wealth, lack of lives, loss of lives, and also the fruits and so on. And then وبشر الصابرين. What do they say? The patiently persistent. They say, إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. This dhikr is so powerful. Remember that anything that we're going through is a trial. The richness of the rich is a trial. The power of the powerful is a trial. The poor, or the poverty of the poor, is a trial. The weakness of the weak is a trial. All of this is a trial. Different people are being trialed and tested in different circumstances. And guess what? It is given based on what is best. It is given to every single person based on what's best for them. Whether or not they are successful in their test, that's up to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them a relevant test that is very, very relevant to them and possible for them to be successful through it. Whether or not they do it, that's a different story. If they do, obviously, that this is where the free will is. If they do, they get their rewards, and if they don't, obviously, they've missed out, and eternal regret follows. So one very important thing is to keep in mind is this world is temporary, and that this is a test, a trial. نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. It is a surely. That word, la, and نَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, the format, and the noon with the shadda. 3 times emphasizing, in other words, surely, we will test you. We will put you to trial. So don't you ever think that this world is for ease and comfort. There will come times that you will be trial tested, and it's up to you whether you want to be successful. It is within your capacity. You can. Nobody should say it's beyond me. I can't take this. I can't take this. Is is basically given into shaitan and the whispering of shaitan. We can take it. If it's given to us, we can take it. We can handle it, and we should be thankful. In fact, this is how, when we remember the story of Ahlul Bayt, Zainab sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, she was asked about what happened. What did she say? I saw nothing but beauty. Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Okay, a beautiful state. Jamila is a beautiful state. It's not a beautiful state given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are martyrs. They reach the highest levels. And so it's a beautiful thing. Doesn't look at the fact that, okay, I lost my brothers, I lost nephews, sons, all these family, the master, my imam, all of this. No, it's a trial, and this is beauty. So one thing is, remember that this world is temporary, and these things are trials, and that we will be returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as we go, in fact, and we are returning. I don't know, the translation typically goes to him we shall return, yes? Is that what normally the translation of Inna ilayhi raji'un? Not very accurate, we need to fix that. We are returning to him. We're ready. وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. We're returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not that we will be returning. No, we are returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's another one. And the third one is to remember the calamities that the awliya Allah went through, especially the calamities of Ahlul Bayt sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And this is why whenever we have martyrs, what do? We hold majlis for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Whenever we have difficult times, we have loss of life, we hold majalis for Ahlul Bayt, specifically for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It is empowering. It brightens our visions. It brightens our hearts. It polishes our hearts and empowers us to take on anything and everything, inshallah.
Is another question?
Yeah, sorry, that took long. Yeah.
No. Can another problem with the dualist view be that evil is presented as an independent and eternal force, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not all-powerful?
Of course, that's definite. So the problem theologically with it, yes, that's the problem. But what I was trying to address is the practical problem. So yes, the theological problem is, yes, you are looking at a force that you're suggesting, well, one is, inshallah, none of us, but one is suggesting that they are an equal force that is a nid, we call it nid, opponent. We have in the supplications of Ahlul Bayt that I am not making an opponent for you. And I will not make an opponent nid for you, Ya Allah. Now, I would never consider one who would be an opponent that can stand against you. Yeah? As soon as Iblis disobeyed, he is outcast. You are rajim and you are outcast until the day that is promised day. So nobody can stand in that position and have power against the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Definitely, that's from a theological perspective, that's the case. However, I was trying to address it from a practical perspective. How would it affect how we see and therefore how we live our lives? So back to the activity, if you remember the discussion that we should be having, inshallah, as a group, hopefully, how does Tawhid influence a Muslim's view? So as a believer, we're monotheist, yeah, muwahhid. How would it influence our view on life, destiny, and purpose? This is actually very important. This exercise broadens our horizons, makes us more powerful in taking on trials in life, actually, if we try and really analyze this properly and try and put it into practice, inshallah. We can call this practical Tawhid. Specific questions?
No, I'm listening. Since it's a discussion, is any?
Yeah, it's a discussion time, so please feel free to give us your opinion. How does it affect your life, your view on life? Or any destiny and purpose? Any of those? Online, in person?
And we'll take one. So when we view our life as a collection of the physical and the spiritual side, I think it helps us to look at life as more meaningful, because like say Mutahhari was comparing animals, right? They're more concerned about the immediate rather than planning for something that might be beyond the space of today or tomorrow and time. And so we are able to plan in a way that gives us more purpose with what we're doing. So I think that when we shape our worldview, putting God at the center of our existence, it gives us the ability to make more meaningful choices rather than trying to just live life for the day.
Yeah, that's definitely the case.
And I think it also creates a little bit more optimism to look forward to some, even if we all have to fulfill our obligations, but I think it gives us more excitement, incentive, either if you feel even mundane tasks can carry a more rewarding feeling because it is done, with the notion or the knowledge that Allah is to please, to gain His pleasure rather than just to do it, So even if you're doing something that might appear on the surface to be meaningless, if you put Allah in the center, it carries a little bit more.
Yes. Do you think of any way of seeing those three things together? Life, destiny, and purpose.
I guess yes, because with Tawhid, life is sacred and it also gives meaning. Destiny is purposeful and it creates justice. And purpose in itself is deeply rooted in Allah's guidance beyond worldly goals. So with the three combined, it gives you at least a sense of direction and that not everything is random.
Yes. That's very true and beautiful way of putting it. There's another angle I wanted to perhaps see it from that angle, where the three are almost like one. Okay, so if we consider the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us life, and He is in charge of the destiny, and He has given us a purpose in life. It's not meaningless, yes? We understand as a monotheist, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has wisdom in everything. So for our life, there's definitely a purpose. Therefore, we should live our life in a way that is fulfilling our purpose to reach the destiny that is intended for us. So we are cognizant of the fact that we have a purpose in this life, and it's not created in vain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says in the Holy Quran that I did not create this world and insan and so on in vain. I did not create la'ibin. It wasn't a game. It wasn't just for fun. Never. And it wasn't a game, it wasn't in vain. In fact, he says in one of the ayat, does insan think that we created him abatha for no reason, in vain, purposeless? No, there's a purpose. So we need to ask ourselves this beautiful hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam. He says 3 questions you need to ask yourself or know the answers for. He says, "Alima min ayna wa fi ayna wa ila ayn." Where from, where in, and where to. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. So we are from Him. And He put us in this world for a reason. That's where we're in and where to we're returning. That the ending, the destiny. So, and seeing it beyond the just short-lived either victory or loss. Sometimes it's a victory, sometimes it's loss, but very short. But seeing the overall picture, and that's what we call the aqib. The overall ending of all things. And so we're working for that, for the good ending, and that is the purpose of our life. To have that good ending, fulfilling the whatever purpose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for every one of us, every individual. There's obviously the purpose of life overall and humanity overall, and there's an individual purpose. For every one of us, there is a purpose, and every one of us can try and fulfill their purpose. So you can see that all of these things, when we look at them from the lens of Tawhid, we're seeing God in everything. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I did not look at anything except that I saw God before, after, and within it. With it. So with it, before it, after it, God is all over. He's encompassing everything. So just like we read, He encompasses everything, including with His mercy, He also encompasses everything. I think that unless anyone has any other reflections or suggestions.
I guess just following up on what you said, it also gives one a sense of accountability as well for their actions in a way that no other worldview does.
Very true. That actually reminds me of the question that they had done a survey in one of the universities. I studied about it when I was in Sydney, but it was about there was a survey out here in the United States. And the question was about a particular crime. I prefer not to share it here, but the question was if it was never possible for you to be caught doing this crime, no consequences whatsoever, would you commit this crime? And it was an anonymous survey, so they had that convenience. And interestingly, if I'm not mistaken, it was some 80%, if I recall correctly, that said they would. There was a crime that would harm others, significantly harm another insan, another human being, and they were willing to. And which is sad. However, it is from again, this is based on a worldview of materialist and one who does not see God in the equation. Because the question itself, like if there were never consequences for that, is given the answer if one has the sense of accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that is not possible. Okay. And so that from that perspective, one would not be able to do that, knowing that they would be facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And even from a monotheistic, muwahhid perspective, we don't see each other as separate entities. We see each other, inshallah, we'll discuss this in more details or deeper, but we see each other as one, extensions, one. من نفس واحدة. That's why in Quran, when you enter a house, it says سلموا على أنفسكم. Say salam to who? Yourselves. Meaning what? Your family is yourself. You know, when you enter your home, you greet your family members, your spouse, your children, parents. That's all yourself. Yeah, أنفسنا وأنفسكم. So nafs is not necessarily just the self. There could be extensions of nafs. Okay. One could elevate to be at that level of nafs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, like in Ayatollah, that أنفسنا وأنفسكم refers to Imam Ali alayhi salam here. But in general, for instance, in the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded Bani Israel to slay, then it says yourselves. But then the narration explains that it was not that they would be doing it to themselves. It's one to the other. And so some explain that by saying, okay, the good ones would slay the criminals or whatever it is, whichever way you look at it. But the point here is that it referred to the other as the self. من نفس واحدة. So your anfus, you're basically the other party is a part of me. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ says. He says, a believer is not a believer until they see others as themselves. And whatever harms the other, harms them. If they're in pain, you're in pain. Just like he says, just like the body. If one body part is in pain, the rest of the body is not in ease. The entire body is in a state of pain or shock. One cannot sleep or rest when the tooth is hurting. Okay, the eye might say, "Well, I want to rest. You're hurting. What does that have to do with me?" But that's not how it works. The body, the whole thing works together, and us human beings, that's how it should be. So yes, the sense of accountability should be there for a monotheist, and seeing each other as one. Beyond even just feeling that, okay, there's accountability on the day of judgment, that's one thing, but ethically or in terms of a human being, how could I harm myself if I see the other as myself? If I get to the level of caring for others, just like I would care for myself, and for some, it's really sad sometimes that we have to see this and speak about this in today's world, a world that supposedly us as human beings, we have progressed so much, and we speak about human rights, we speak about the rights of the minorities, we speak about the rights of children, and even parents do not have the right to harm their own children. You have the state would come after you if you harm your children. What do they call them here? The child protective services or something. And, which is beautiful. They come and protect the children from their own parents because they don't belong to you. You're only a provider for them. So this is all well and good. And next thing is we have people killing innocent children in another part of the world, speaking about the same principles, but yet that is happening. The question is, how does it happen? It's simply because my children are my children. These children are not my children. Whereas a monotheist does not see it this way. A monotheist, these children are just like my children. And so you'll find that a monotheist would never be able to harm an innocent child, for instance. If they do, they're not monotheists in practice. They might be monotheists in theory, talk, labels, but not in practice. In practice, a monotheist sees him as himself. It is not. If God allows in a defensive war to fight another human being or take the life of another human being in a war situation, under the rule of God to defend the better good of humanity, they do it. Even then, they're not excited about it. It's not like, okay, I'm happy that, no. You'll find that, some of these people, they're fighting and killing others and they're laughing about it. And that's not a state that a human being should be in, yes? So this is where the distinction is between a monotheistic worldview and the rest, regardless again of labels and names. And a real monotheist sees everybody, not just the accountability, that's a beautiful point, but beyond that, ethically cannot do it. Like, I cannot do it. How can I harm another human being? How he's just like me. You look at SubhanAllah, and I can go on and on about this point. You look at the eyes of another human being. Okay? They are, that takes you, it's almost like the gate to the soul, yeah? You look at the eyes, and this is another human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created out of love, kindness, mercy. He created this other human being. How could you think of harming them, for example? How could you not think of making them happier? You know, the hadith says to make them happy is an act of worship. Idkhal al-surur, to make them happy is an act of worship. To bring a smile to their face is an act of worship. And that's a monotheistic approach. It could be just the idea, or it could lead to one practically living it. That just like God created me, He created them. You know, again, monotheism. We don't have two gods, do we? We have the one. So just like I'm created, they're created. So one ascends to much higher levels in terms of their relationships with other human beings if they are, in fact, monotheistic in their worldview. Monotheistic in their worldview. Yes.
So sometimes I'm just trying to understand is when people commit crime or sins,
Mhm.
I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but is it partly because of the ideological dislocation with the Tawhid concept? On the one hand, maybe they don't fully grasp Tawhid, or it could be related to too many sins that kathrat al-dhunub,
Yeah.
qaswat al-qulub type
Yes.
concept.
Yes.
That you can, because now you no longer have the same level of moral inclination to evaluate your decision, like when you are clean, when you have a clean heart. Do you think there is something to be said of that?
Yes, definitely. So when it comes to the hardening of the heart through sins, it goes hand in hand with the dislocation, as you put it, or this misunderstanding of Tawhid, of the wrong worldview, because it also puts a barrier on the heart, and when there's a barrier, there's no vision. The vision is blurred. So the heart, which is the gauge, which is the one that should show you good from bad and should see God in everything, all of a sudden is now blinded, cannot see. And so what does it see? Sees immediate benefits, gains that they may have immediately through an action, so they go for it and commit those sins. And with time, it comes to the point where the hearts become harder than rocks. as Quran puts it. And actually, it's a beautiful analogy in that ayah, how the rocks could even split and water comes out. It's basically to say that it becomes completely useless. What is the purpose of the heart? Now, we're not speaking of the physical heart, okay, that pumps the blood. What is the purpose of our heart, the spiritual heart? Any suggestion? Why? What is the heart given for?
What is the difference between the heart and the soul? Or is it one and the same thing?
Now, the heart versus the soul being one or two, although at times it's used interchangeably, nevertheless, it's not one. The heart typically refers to the ability to understand, comprehend. لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها. So the ability to understand, the ability to comprehend a combination of emotions and information, knowledge and emotions together, that this is why Quran uses heart and the intellect, the aql and the qalb, uses it interchangeably sometimes. That, you know, sometimes understanding and comprehension is referred to or reference to the heart, sometimes it's reference to the intellect, aql. So that combination of the understanding and you know, having the emotions and the feelings around those understandings that lead to action. That is typically what the qalb is referred to. So the qalb is a gauge. Okay, if you feel positive towards something, you're more likely to do it. Yes. If you feel negative, you're more likely not to do it. If you feel positive towards, so it's those feelings, understanding combined with feelings that lead to our actions, basically, sinful or dutiful and obedient. So the heart is the gauge. Okay. Now, what if you have the gauge in your car, the gas gauge? What if it's gone wrong and it's always showing full? Okay, you'll end up having, it's happened to me. Okay. Well, you run out of gas and you don't even know it. Okay. Or your temperature gauge, that happened to me too. It was stuck in the middle. And so the car overheated and the engine almost seized. And I'm looking at the temperature, it's still at the middle. Okay, so faulty gauge. Yeah, so with a faulty gauge, you'll have serious problems in life. If you're, you cannot tell the right temperature or the right, the quantity or quality of things. The heart is supposed to tell us right from wrong. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired the heart with all of that. And He actually made us love right and detest wrong. He says, وَحَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. He made faith and faithfulness beloved to you and made it, beautified it in your hearts. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And then He made you detest وَكَرَّهَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْكُفْرَ وَالْفُسُوقَ وَالْعِصْيَانَ. Denial and transgression and disobedience. All of this He made you detest. So sometimes you wonder, why do we like certain? I get those questions often. That why do I feel like these things are nice when Quran says, these are sins, and He made you detest sins? Because the heart, what happened to it? It's blurred. The vision of the heart is gone. Okay, or it became so hard. None of us never. It became so hard that it's so useless. It's meant to do something that it's not doing at all. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. Hijara, as hard as they are, sometimes water flows through them. And yet these hearts, nothing. No goodness, no inspiration, nothing flows through them. So the Quran has that analogy of ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قلوبكم من بعد ذلك فهي كالحجارة أو أشد قسوة. It's even harder than rocks. So useless, nothing goes through them. So they're engaged to give you information, and they have receptors, and all of a sudden it's not doing anything. So definitely continuous sinning, it blurs the vision, and so with blurred vision, one doesn't see God in things, cannot see God in things. All they see is immediate pleasures, gains that they can have, and that's all that matters. Whereas with a clear vision, one sees the bigger picture, sees God, sees the hereafter, sees their place in paradise. The Ahlul Bayt, they reach the place where they see their place in paradise. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam, when he was brought to Al-Askar, Baghdad, and from there towards. So he was made to stay in a place which was humiliating. And so one of his companions came and was saying, "Ibn Rasulullah, it hurts me seeing you in this." The Imam said to him, "Come." He made him see the reality of where the Imam is. And he says, "I saw beautiful gardens with things that I could never even imagine or describe in my life. The beauty that the Imam is living in, the other dimension." So the Imam showed him the reality of where he is. He sees himself in paradise. Why? Because he's in the state of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reality of it. Whereas one with limited vision does not see that. With blurred vision or no vision, the rock parts, they don't see anywhere, but they just see the animal, basically desires and immediate gains that the animals go after, and even worse. Quran says even worse than the animals. Animals don't go as bad as some humans do. But they are related. The two are related, yes. Any other comments or questions?
Also, when God says he guides and misguides whomever he wishes. So how would you explain the misguidance?
That actually we had a discussion on a hadith from the Ayatollah. He uses all these terms that God misguides, or he seals on the hearts, or he misleads. We have those terms that are used in the Quran. Yudallullah, and so on. He says that God is far from any of that. He allows through his on the formative level of creation, when he created Taqween, on that level of creation, he made this universe in a way that certain actions have certain reactions or consequences. And so he refers to that level, that he allows it. If he doesn't, nothing can happen without his will, without his permission. So we have the ayah, for example, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whenever they see a good thing, they say this is from God. Whenever they see something evil, they say this is from you, referring to the Prophet. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, tell them, قُلْ كُلُّ مَنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Everything is from God. Now here, everything refers to what? Both the good and what they consider as evil. Yes? And then a clarification. Yes, everything is from God. Good is initiated from God, bad initiated from your own actions. So that is, the dalal is from their own actions. It's a consequence of their own action. They oppress, they are misguided. That's a result of their action. وَيُضِلُّ اللَّهُ الظَّالِمِينَ. Or he misguides the fasiqeen. وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. So fasiqeen, ظالمين, transgressors, they constantly are committing sins. Their hearts harden. They don't see the truth, they're misguided. Okay, he gave them the heart to see and decide accordingly. They can constantly, fisk is, openly sinful, deliberately and openly sinful. So they did it and did it and did it. Eventually, the heart cannot see, and therefore they're misguided. He allowed it in the level of creation, because if he wanted to, he would have made us all like angels, where we would never be able to go astray or do the wrong thing, make a wrong decision. He did not. He made us have the free will, and through that we can get to the highest levels. At the same time, with that, if we don't make the right decisions, we can go to asfala سافلين. We made him في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين. So we can go to the lowest of the low if we make the wrong decisions. And we have the ability to go to the highest level, above even the angels, malak. Yeah. Question or reflection, maybe? Mind you, this is meant to be a discussion, a dialogue.
When we said Islam is the right religion, the people who have not been exposed to Islam, would they have a problematic worldview from the lens of Tawhid?
Yeah.
And so is that also a factor that might contribute to their...
Yeah. Very good point. So a Muslim versus another religion, another religious group, and their worldview in light of our discussion, monotheistic versus other. I think I alluded to it, but just to be clear, we're not speaking of the labels here. We're speaking of the real believers who see God as the one and only one, in control of everything, with no opponents and no other power that can fight him, or as we read in Ayat al-Kursi, Allah la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum, la ta'khudhuhu sinatun wa la nawm, man dha alladhi yashfa'u 'indahu illa bi'idhnihi. So we have the not even shafa'a can happen without his permission. Okay, so no, the concept of tafwid. So some people say, okay, did God give certain abilities to certain people to decide on certain things or not? So some suggest if you believe in tafwid, you're not a believer. But Quran says otherwise. Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we said, Ya the Qarnayn, Qulna Ya the Qarnayn. You decide, you want to deal with them with goodness or bad. Okay, or even other ayat in the Quran. So all of this happens with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As long as we see that it is with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that worldview is fine, complete. Now, does it mean that a non-Muslim, a Christian, a Jewish, or other monotheistic religion, can they fall in the same category, or are they out? Anyone who believes in God genuinely, the oneness of God, and acts accordingly, falls into the right category. They would have monotheistic world, genuinely, and submits to God and acts accordingly. Now, typically, a good heart and a person who is genuine in their submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what happens is, whenever they're exposed to any truth from God, they see it, they acknowledge it, they accept it. Okay, they don't deny it. If they do, then there's a problem. Because that is the problem of the worldview, again. If it was Tawhid, this is the truth, he presented it to me, I take it. But if it's not, then could be so many other deities that they may have in their minds. Quran says, you know, you should remember God like you remember your ancestors or more. كذكركم آباءكم أو أشد ذكرا. Now, who remembers their ancestors frequently? Not consciously, but subconsciously. Okay. So if we're blinded by wanting to follow our ancestors and their path, blindly with no questions, and therefore not submitting to the truth that is presented to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a problem. That's no longer a monotheistic worldview. Okay? But if it is a monotheistic worldview where one is really seeing God in everything and therefore serving God in everything that they can, with whatever they can, then they fall in the same category. So I don't think we can limit it to certain religious group. It is, again, with the Muslims, many so-called Muslims who would even lead prayers ended up committing the worst atrocities the history of mankind has recorded. Yes? So they were under the banner of Islam, supposedly, but they were never really Muslims, and their worldview was never a monotheistic worldview. Would that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Any practical tips to strengthen Tawhid or something?
Excellent. One of the most practical tips for Tawhid, to strengthen Tawhid, is praying on time. Because of the priority. You know, nothing should have a priority over the Creator. Yeah? If we see Him and everything through Him, even our children, even our spouse, our loved ones, our parents, everyone, we love them through Him. We see Him in everything, our sustenance, our work, success through Him. Okay, not that I did it. أوتيت على علم عندي. قارون, I did it. I was so good. It is suggested that Qarun is actually his title by his profession. So Qarun was not his name. Yeah, Qarun, it means it is suggested that it is about one who is in construction, like a builder. So he was very good and earned a lot of money through his hard work and his engineering abilities, perhaps. And so that was his title. Okay. When he was asked, "Why don't you share?" he said, "I got it because I have the skills. You know, whereas a believer sees it as a gift from God. Many people could have wisdom, skills, way more than you do, but they didn't get the opportunity. And where they're born, where they live, what opportunities are presented to them in life, often determines their wealth and what is given to them in this life as part of their trial. So when it comes to monotheistic worldview, regardless of what group of faith one belongs to, they see it the right path and they act in accordance with that.
One question came in, and then I think you might just any reminder before next week you can share if there's anything. Yes. It's what about those who do evil and claim it in the name of God, like the ISIS, believing at least teaching that they'll get heaven for the evil that they do?
What is the question?
What about those who do evil and claim that it is in the name of God, like, and they believe that they're going to get heaven because of this evil? So
the tip for the ones who want to get closer was to pray on time. So these people, I don't have a tip. Is that the? No, I don't know if it was meant to be a tip or.
No, they're just what about them? Yeah.
Now, Quran refers to them as al-akhsarina a'mal, the biggest losers because they are, they think that they're doing good, but they're not. Why does it happen to them? Why would they do the wrong thing despite thinking that they're doing the right thing? It is a product of their choices, their own choices that they make. They make their own, some wrong choices, including sinful actions, prioritizing wrong. Therefore, they would be blinded, and sometimes they think that they're doing good, and they, in actual fact, are doing the wrong thing or evil acts. And often in those situations, it is, again, back to free will. It is not that they don't have the opportunity or the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's there for everybody. But it's their choices that limited their vision in a way that they cannot see it. Guidance is there, but they cannot see it. Ibn Mujtaba, Ayatollah, he came and gave his allegiance to Imam Ali alayhi salam to join him and be amongst his followers. When he did, Imam Ali alayhi salam recited a poem, which in short means, I want his life and he wants my death. He wants to kill him, basically. He knew from that. Now, if we look at individuals like that in their lives, we'll find many instances where they had the opportunity to see the truth and choose right, but they did not. They prioritized wrong. And I think it's in line with what we discussed earlier. If you prioritize God, therefore you pray on time. So some of our great scholars of akhlaq, whenever they were asked in this journey of strengthening faith and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they said pray on time. These people, they had their own priorities. Okay, at one point, his priority became simply a person who he got attracted to. That's the story of Ibn Mujtaba when he came back to Kufa with the intention of, he had already come with the intention of killing Imam Ali alayhi salam. However, he started having doubts. And perhaps part of it was remembering what the Imam said to him, remembering his bay'ah to the Imam. And when Al-Ash'ath realized that he was having doubts, he got him to get further incentives from that Qatan, who had lost her father in the battle against the Khawarij in Nahrawan. So basically, that became his incentive. And look at the priorities, subhanAllah. From meeting God, being a follower and a lover of Imam Ali alayhi salam, to wanting something so worldly which he never got anyway. So when they sell themselves so cheap and they often don't get what they're even trying for, or then don't get to enjoy it. They get it, but they don't get to enjoy it. That's the reality of worldly choices or materialistic choices. Answers that one. Any other questions or comments? Not.
Inshallah, just send a reminder for next week.
Yeah. So inshallah, for next week we'll have also the outline, and you can post it. And please try and read through the chapters so that we have more contributions. I hope and pray that we can have more contributions so I can learn more, inshallah.
Maybe you can recommend if people are local, if they still want to come, they can.
Yeah. So just to clarify, I will be traveling next week. I will be available virtually, but whoever is local and would like to participate in group discussions locally, it would be definitely more beneficial. I know virtual world is brilliant, is very useful, and sometimes it comes in very handy. However, it will never come close to the real world. I hope we understand that. That's why we can never have Jama'ah in virtual world, can we? So far, we don't have that ruling, and I hope that we don't get to that to that level, because there's a difference between presence and the energy, the positive energy emanated from the believers, even the obviously given the correct gender interactions, even the shaking of the hands, washes away sins. And purifies our hearts. So there's definitely no comparison between in person and online, but obviously for those who are unable to, we will be, in fact, myself, I'll be traveling, so I'll be joining from a different location, inshallah. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى